Hey everybody, and welcome to All About the Gig. My name is Steve, and I'm very excited to introduce our first guest today. But before we do that, just a few little housekeeping pieces. So, same as usual, if anybody has any questions for our guest today, please feel free to submit them in the comment section, and we'll get to them towards the end of the chat. So, I'm going to read this so I get this right. Our first guest today is a session bassist from Mullingar, Ireland, and has been living in LA for the past 6 years. She's one of the most sought-after session bassists in LA, whose clientele list includes the legendary Dee Snider of Twisted Sister, one of my favorite bands of all time, Stephen Adler of Guns N' Roses, and Maynard James Keenan of the legendary band Tool. She's also worked with Ronnie Wood from the Rolling Stones, insane, and has also toured with Riverdance. On top of all of this, she is currently filming a travel, culture, and food show with Derrick Green of Sepultura. She's got some cool friends, which is called Highway to Health Show. And she also tours as a keynote speaker and is a passionate activist. So with that, I'm absolutely delighted to introduce Tanya.
How's it going? On the town.
It's going great. I know you're straight out of another interview, so I really appreciate you kind of doing back to back and jumping on and chatting with me. It's a pleasure to have you. So would you be able to give us a background of yourself and kind of how you got into playing music and where you're from and how you got to LA?
Yeah, just how did I get here? Good question. Mullingar, all the way from Mullingar to start with. Mullingar, born and raised on the town. Basically, I came very late to music, which is sometimes people surprised. I wasn't about 17 when I first picked up a bass. Before that, I just worked in animal welfare. I worked with all the rescue shelters. Anyone that follows me knows my background is passion animal rights, mostly. Sea Shepherd repping. So I literally came to music very late, but I was always around it. So my dad was a big fan of music, and he worked in promotions, smaller promotions in Ireland and back in the day in bigger ones. So I was kind of always just surrounded by that culture with my dad's interest in it. And then I just started playing with some local musicians when I was about 16 or 17. I played drums for a minute and I couldn't afford a drum kit. So my drumming career was short-lived. I did get a piece of shit drum kit there for a while. And anyway, I decided one night I did a gig in the Stables in Mullingar. My first band I was ever in with Johnny Cronin and Mick Cronin. It was the first band I was ever in, the Cronin brothers. And I was actually singing backgrounds. And I remember going up and doing the gig, and I was singing backgrounds, and I played drums in one song, and I was like, that's it, I want to be a musician. So I immediately dropped out of school to become a musician, which was so devastating for my parents, but it was hilarious because in hindsight, I was like, that's it. Now, there was various other reasons leading up to that. I always was a very curious mind, and I just didn't feel like I was allowed to explore what I was really interested in, the format of the school system. So that was kind of like the straw that broke the camel's back, per se. So yeah, I went and I did a music course in Mullingar in the Foss Centre, and I applied as a drummer, and I went in and they had an electronic drum kit, and I was like, yeah, I don't want to play this. And this is way before like Roland brought out all these deadly kits and whatnot. So I saw a local bass player playing bass, Niall Masterson, and he was just playing the most beautiful melodic and harmonic lines. I'd never seen anything like it. I'd never really thought of bass outside of, plodding along in the background, kind of rock bass or whatever, to put it in a box. So when I saw Niall play, I was just kind of mesmerized, and I dropped drums and I picked up bass, and I just started becoming completely obsessed with it. And yeah, I just like immediately joined bands. That I think is the key with why I got so into this so deeply. I was in a band within about 2 or 3 weeks of playing bass, and I was terrible, but my cousin let me join his band. So that was where it started.
Not that terrible.
I was by far the worst in the band. It was hilarious.
Brilliant. Yeah, I mean, like it's being in a band it's kind of infectious, isn't it? You kind of get into it and you just instantly want to join in there and meet people and start playing with people.
You're a teacher.
Yeah, absolutely. You hit on one actually interesting topic there, kind of just on the whole school system, and kind of you got fed up of it. I suppose, do you think it's difficult kind of like getting support to pursue a career as a musician? Because probably to your point on what you said there, like I was very much raised in kind of the environment of like, oh, you need to get a 9-to-5 job, and you have to do X, Y, and Z, and you need this certificate. And like, did you find, like, when you went down the road and dropped out of and went and pursued the career, did you find that it was difficult? Did you get like a lot of kind of support, or what way did that go?
I mean, that whole, like, you need your leaving cert to get anywhere in life, right? Yeah. That's a real Irish thing. But I think definitely in my case, what helped is just pure stubbornness. It was immediately a little difficult because it was shocking for my family and for the school, because I was basically a straight A student the whole time, but I was just questioning the system per se. And that was like met with a lot of pushback. Like, what do you mean you're leaving school and you're going to be a musician? At this point, I was actually only singing backgrounds and kind of drumming a bit, so it was a little crazy that. And then I ended up picking up bass. But I think that kind of resistance and that pushback is what pushed me. So it was kind of like I'll prove you, and now I can't fail.
Yeah, absolutely. It's. Yeah, I mean, it's a pity, like, in a way. I mean, like, in my school, it was, we had actually a little bit of good support, in relation to music, but it was never, the career guidance teacher was never like, you should, you could do this.
You should be a career musician. Well, that's what's really interesting. I went to Loreto, all girls Catholic school, if you can believe that. I was in there, and I remember asking when I wanted to do music if I could play drums, and they were like, no, you can play violin or piano. And I was like, well, I want to play drums. They were like, no. And then I asked if I could do woodwork, and they were like, no, you have to do home economics. So
yeah. Well, that's what I mean. I mean, it's like, I'm not sure what it's like now in school. Obviously, I'm out of school a long time, but like, I do hope it's changed, because it was similar, for myself. Like, and but like, even for taking music for the leaving cert, you kind of like, oh, you're doing music, like, you're not doing like, metalwork or whatever it may be, like that kind of, you could be like, like a welder or something, or, you could steer down like a trade route or whatever. It'd be nice if you did see schools maybe do that, or maybe they do, but do you feel it was?
Yeah, I think supporting the arts is always important. That doesn't mean everybody's going to go into a career in the arts. The arts is a really difficult career path to choose, and you have to be really savvy to a multitude of things to survive in this sort of whole scope of the arts. But I think that if the schools supported it more, and even just let people, express that side of themselves, and then figure out if it was something they wanted to involve, by like suppressing it, it's always weird, right? So you're going to make them want to do it more, basically. Yeah. Well, that's what happened with me. It's like, you can't do that. I'm like, that's exactly what I'm going to do.
But that's rock and roll. That's cool.
Exactly. Something like that.
Yeah, like it's super cool. So, okay, so take me from, we're jumping a little bit, but so, you move out to LA, and kind of could you maybe give a breakdown really of maybe someone that might not know what a session musician means, or what that job entails? Maybe just a brief description, roles, responsibilities of what you do every day, I suppose, or what a session musician means to be.
Yeah, it's a great question, because I didn't even fully understand it myself when I sort of started doing it, because when I was back in Ireland, and even when I first started, my whole thing was I was always in multiple bands. And I think that really stands people. I always tell people they should be in more than one band, or play with more than one group of musicians, because that's what, it's going to broaden your palette of music and your experience with people live. But I was going around and being in all these bands, mostly, your own projects that you were creating with friends, or you're writing the music and all that. And that was great. And you're gigging, and you're trying to get venues to pay you. And then I slowly started getting involved in background TV bands, which paid. And they would hire you to come in. I did like the Late Late Show and some stuff for The Voice and different RTE programs. And that sort of gave me this moment of, wait a minute, you can get paid to do music? Because before that, you're just like slogging around the country in your high-ace van with the band thrown in the back and all the gear, Yeah. So once I sort of started seeing that it could be a career, I really made sure that I was involved in multiple things. So I would do my own band, which I had many of them over the years in Ireland, my own like original band that I would put all my heart and soul into it, the creative side of it. But then I would do like the wedding corporate bands, which are also wonderful and fun. And that started to bring in the financial side of it, and then, you know, doing the for hired stuff that then led to other tours. So essentially what being a session, over here it's called like a hired gun, a session musician, is that you're being hired into the situation. And I just got to a point in Ireland where I've been in so many original bands, all of which I had a lot of fun with and love, but there was always something that came with the band. You know, there's always one person in the band that just brings this giant ego or screws something up or whatever it is, drama. Or I was like, you know what, I really want to do this, so I'm going to just try and be hired into bands. Let's see how this goes. And it was kind of just like an exploration myself, and I almost accidentally ended up becoming a session musician because I would just say yes to everything: pop, rock, funk stuff, R&B, hip hop, you name it. I would be like, yeah, I'll do it. Go, you need a bass player, I'll do it.
Yeah, gotcha. Yeah, that's a really interesting point. Because I suppose the question I'd ask you on that is like you know, being as successful as you have been out there with, you know, these, I mean, rock gods really. Do you feel that maybe being open-minded and being, you know, open to all types of genre, or, you know, being flexible, I suppose, do you think that's key in being a session musician, that you need to be like, you know, you can't be kind of in one lane, you have to be flexible?
Absolutely. I think that versatility and being open to play multiple genres that obviously you are comfortable with is absolutely key. Because when I first started, I was just a metaler. Like, I loved metal so much, and I was in a metal band, and I was, you know, 16, 17-year-old with angst. I was like, yeah, I'm going to be a metaler forever. And I'm still a metaler, but I also, you know, my favorite band in the world was Fleetwood Mac. So I kind of always stressed that playing everything. And when I first came to LA, the first 3 or 4 bands I was in was all hip hop rappers. It was so much fun, and I had never done it before, and I was kind of terrified because it was a new genre for me. And I just had so much fun. And what I learned from that and kind of breaking out of that, and even back in Ireland, the first time that I sort of stood outside of the metal box per se was playing with Brian McFadden, and then doing like all the Childline gigs at Westlife and Boyzone and playing behind those pop bands, but meeting the other session musicians that were hired into these bands that, you know, as a teenager, you're like, oh, it's pop or whatever, you have this opinion in your head of boy bands, were just some of the best musicians I'd ever come across. And they were all like hired professional musicians. And that's what started, you know, triggering this idea in my head. So I think absolutely you should never, just because you think you don't like whatever it is, pop or rock or blah, 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 don't turn it down like for that reason. In fact, you should do it because of that reason, because chances are that's exactly what you're going to learn from.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. I mean, even recently, you know, like I like really heavy music as well, but I just as an example, like I've really kind of gotten into Alice in Chains recently, and actually on the newer material than some of the older stuff that people really like love, you know. But you know, I wasn't really open to that genre just for a while, but just listening to that band, like even just the vocals alone, you know, I'm listening to that, the harmonies, and it's bringing, you know, benefits to me and my kind of genre. So even I think if people are more kind of open to listen to different genres, even, you know, outside of working in the industry as well, it really broadens your horizon, I think.
Yeah, and it develops your ear, and it makes you think a little differently when you're collaborating with musicians. It's great.
Yeah, absolutely. So I suppose would it be fair in saying that, like, as a session musician, there's kind of two sides to it. There's kind of like the live side and kind of the studio side. So would you kind of give me a rundown of kind of what the differences are between what's required on let's say a session in the studio towards, let's say, a week in the studio towards maybe a week on the road, and what disciplines need to change, or is it the same, or what's your feedback?
Yeah, good question. Well, studio, you know, it varies. Obviously, it depends on the artist. And I've done a lot of different sessions. Some are just, you know, really simple, beautiful sort of singer-songwriter type stuff. Quite often you'll go in and be just feeling it out in those scenarios. But my whole rule of thumb, whether it's touring or studio, is you should always be completely over-prepared. That there's no other way, and you should be early, because if you're not early, you're late. And I go in with a very, I don't want to say blank slate, but, you know, I'm not a big gearhead when it comes to gear. I have a very simple setup, and I try to keep that in a especially in a studio setting, because you don't want to arrive into a studio session with your sound all dialed in and like, this is what I like loads of distortion, or I like loads of chorus, or whatever it is, because that person is hiring you to play there their music, and your job is to play what's best for the song, not to go in and show off. And obviously it's different if someone's hiring like Flea in and you want to sound like Flea, but in general, most of normal non-Flea humans are you want to go in very it's for the music. You're there for their music. You're there to be, especially as a bass player. I mean, as every instrument, but especially as the rhythm section, you're there to kind of like lay it down. And so I think that's a very important thing, and being over prepared, even if you think it's the simplest music, because you just want to have it so ingrained in your head if it's already pre-written, obviously. So I always say be over prepared for sure, be on time, know your shit inside out, and be very easy to be around. That is the biggest thing in this music industry that people forget. You can be as talented as you want. If you're a pain in the ass, you're not going on tour. It's that simple. As they say, it's all about the hang is the big thing in the industry, which is so true. Obviously you're hired because they know you can play, but if you're going to bring all of your problems and drama and whatnot on a tour bus, which is very intense to live on the road with people that you may not know from before, you're living in, it is very little glamour to touring, which is always really funny to break down. It's like, you're living on a tour bus, you're in airports, you're doing 2 or 3 flights a day, whatever, it's just madness. So I think just being very easy to be around and being calm and being, a kind and approachable person definitely helps. But they vary, back to your question, they vary, but they're also very similar, because obviously for live, I think a lot of times people think that the music can be looser. I mean, to a certain extent, that's true, because you're, rocking out or whatever you want to call it. But you should always still be completely over prepared. And also, eyeballs on your band is something that you absolutely have to be really, really diligent with, especially as bass player with the drummer. Shit goes wrong all the time on stage, no matter how rehearsed you are. That's happened to me before. Like, I mean, it can be technical issues. I remember with the Riverdance, we had like actual pieces of the stage mechanically stop working, and on the spot, you have to figure out, instead of getting trampled by a giant stage coming through you, maybe we should move over here and play, or keep going in the bridge. But communication with your band is absolutely key. Like, we've had some really funny stuff go down over the years with Dee or with Stephen or that, and it's just like everybody's like making sure they're looking at each other, and that's a real attribute to being a professional live and studio musician. And the same in studio, but studio will vary obviously, especially nowadays, because you can do so much remote recording. But if you're in the lucky occasions, which I still love doing, the full live band, which I just did one last year, was the first time in ages I'd been in a full live studio for Sweetwater, and they have a huge studio in Fort Wayne, Indiana. And we were actually in the studio, drums, bass, guitar, everyone like together. And that was, that doesn't happen as much anymore, which is sad. But yeah, just, I mean, being over prepared, making sure the simple things, like making sure you've had your gear checked. Like, people don't keep their basses or guitars or whatever checked. Like, get your intonation checked, make sure that basic stuff, change your strings, make sure that your knobs are not squeaking and rusty, so that when you turn off your bass, it's all these little things that people forget about, I think, that are probably the key. And just, again, just be easy to work with is so essential in this industry.
Well, yeah. So interesting, because like, it's just something especially if you're kind of novice maybe, and you haven't been fortunate enough to spend time in a studio. Yeah, I mean, simple things like your gear not working, it's just a disaster, like, and especially if the studio doesn't have gear. I mean, would you say that gear is, because gear is a whole different, with musicians, I think you can go down this rabbit hole of gear. So like, how important do you think gear is for your, I mean, you kind of touched on it, but, could you perform, a session with just your bass, or how important do you think gear really is? Like, do you think as musicians we kind of over obsess about gear sometimes?
In my personal opinion, I think we absolutely do. I come from the kind of train of thought of, I have an amazing bass. I use Sadowski basses. So that is the kind of gear investment per se, because and that doesn't mean that like you have to have a really expensive custom instrument or anything. But what I mean by that is, if you have that foundation, the rest of it comes from you as a player. There's no harm in having, a basic great pedal board. This is going to vary obviously for guitarists that are going for solos versus bass player. I keep a very, very flat basic setup. I have a great bass that no matter what I plug it into, the preamp is so wonderful that it pretty much sounds great through everything. And it stands its own ground, and it travels really well because it's great wood and it's lightweight and all that. So that to me as a professional musician is everything. Like having those basses, I know no matter, because you cannot predict. Yes, we put what we want on the rider, even for studios, but it depends on where you are in the world. I can't always get the GK rig that I want. I can't always get the wireless pack that I want. So you can't rely on gear to sound good, is kind of my whole point. It's coming from you. It's coming like that soul, that music, that feel, whatever it is, it's coming from you as a musician. You're channeling it through gadgets after that. And that's not downplaying or dissing. Of course, there's amazing gear, and I've used a multitude of gear. Like even the session with Maynard is a great example. That was, he wanted that, like playing around with mad sounds. But you also don't want to like turn all of those off and then suddenly be like, you sound all right. You know, I think that you should be comfortable. And I only go to sessions with just my bass. I request what I want. I don't lug gear around. I sometimes bring like a head if I know that, you know, it's a real stripped down or low budget or something. But the other great thing about bass is you can just DI it. And nowadays you can pull up any, you know, interface you want. And I can get, which is kind of strange as well. And that's not to say I don't love the old school studio way of going in and getting out the big ass rig and micing it up and doing it that way. But the point is that, yeah, it's not your gear that makes you good. It's you coming through and channeling through these instruments. So it's definitely worth having, if you're serious about being a session musician, having a really good solid instrument and looking after the instrument is key as well.
Got it. Yeah, I mean, that makes sense. I mean, if you're married to your gear and you can't get it, like you know, you have to be able to perform, right? So it's only to a level, I guess. I would imagine, maybe I'm wrong, but you know, when you are maybe geared towards the studio a little bit more, maybe live as well, but as a session musician, like you know, you might be working with artists that you have worked with artists that are maybe playing some material that they want a certain way, or maybe you're going into a session that, you know, they kind of giving you a little bit of freedom, and you put down a take and you're getting feedback. So what's your general approach to criticism if you have done something, and how important do you think it is to be able to take criticism? And because I imagine like it's I mean, you know, being in bands myself, like it's usually like when you're kind of saying, oh, maybe drop that out there, and then the argument starts that maybe we shouldn't drop it out there. And what do you think is the best way of dealing with criticism, and what's your opinion on kind of your whole approach to, you know, a session where like you get feedback basically?
Yeah, well, I think that it's very important to be able to take feedback and remember, depending on the situation. So if you're hired in, if an artist has hired you to play on their record and they're asking you to change something, don't take that as a negative. You have to put yourself in their shoes as an artist. If you wrote a song and the bass player came in and, you know, tried to start playing a solo over one of the verses, and you're like, hey, do you mind stripping it back a little bit? You should be able to say, okay, cool, like I see your vision and I'm here to play for your music. Obviously, if you're collaborating with artists, it's different, and you have to be able to hash it out though. At the end of the day, you should all be on the same page. You're trying to get the best song and the best content, the best music out. So if you notice your ego coming into it, I think is important. If you feel like, if you get enraged by feedback, that right there is your red flag. You like just notice that, because if you go in the defense in anything in life, this applies to many things outside of music, especially with the way we're all keyboard warriors these days. Don't like just squash that right there, because it's not a personal insult on your playing. They might just be saying, hey, you know, I envisioned a little less busy there, or more busy, or whatever it is, you know. So I think being able to talk and communicate with the people in the session and hash it out and just be open, because at the end of the day, you want to be proud of your work, and you don't want to spend your time in the studio fighting for extra notes or whatever.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, like it's difficult. I mean, like it is, especially maybe if you're in like an original band, you know, where you're all in the same boat. Like, and I suppose, I mean, you kind of explained it there, but you know, just learning how to take criticism, because I think maybe as a younger musician myself, anyway, like, you know, I wasn't really great at doing that. So I think it's a skill that people maybe need to learn, and I as you said, like it kind of doesn't just translate to inside music, you know, it translates, you know.
Translates it all, and none of us were good with that. That's like, we were all terrible. Like, you'd be offended, you know, what do you mean you don't like my bass sound?
I made it myself.
I may spend ages in the shed, like getting this, dialing it in. No, I think it's something you learn. Like, that's the beauty of life. Like, you're constantly learning, and it's great. And ask questions and learn. And for me, I came from a background of always basically being the least experienced in the band, because I jumped into bands from such a young age without knowing anything. So I had to ask and learn from people and not be shy about that. So I think that's great. And just like really noticing that. And again, like, I can't stress that enough, because that applies to everything in life. And again, that whole, like, this whole like online weird world we live in now, and the technocracy and all that crap. Like, stop when you have that feeling of like rage come up in you because someone is simply saying, maybe we change that part of the song, or, you know, maybe you're wrong, or whatever it is. Like, if you're getting that anger, that's something that you should like try and just like squash immediately and grow from there, because that's not good for you, let alone the song or the session, or, you know, the people you're working with. It's not good for your own mental health if you can't come into like a healthy debate scenario or just conversation.
Absolutely. And it kind of goes back to kind of, you know, just being easy to be around, right? Like, kind of, just it instantly changes the vibe when you kind of, you know, bring up something like that. I just want to switch to kind of like just a little bit of gear talk. I know there's definitely going to be some people watching this that will probably wanted to get some feedback, but I've noticed kind of recently, just from playing myself, that I'm not sure it would be applicable in your world, maybe because you're playing with big rock bands, but that stage volume has been constantly coming down and down and down.
Finally.
So, yeah. I want to get your feedback on that, and you know, because bass is such an instrument that like takes up such a big part of the stage because the frequencies are so big, and you know, you can hear it everywhere really on the stage. How do you feel about, like, you know, being asked to turn down, or do you prefer actually to be on in-ears and to have it turned off completely, or what's your feedback?
Yeah, I mean, again, it varies. The venues are a big aspect of that, obviously, and the sound in the room, lower ceilings. There's so many components to that, but in general, I have respect and faith in the front of house and the monitor people, and I think that's something that needs to be just worldwide. Like, these guys know what they're doing. Yeah, we've all come across those guys who are girls that are, you know, there's an attitude there and they're just trying to defeat the band, of course, but that's, again, in every walk of life. But you have to understand that those people are there to do their job, and they understand the room and they understand sound. So this competition on stage of like, turn up, everybody turn up. And this, like, I've had it so much over the years. It's like that balance, spending a little time with the on-stage sound and spending a little time with the monitor engineer to get it right, and walking around the stage when you're doing sound check. Like, I think this is something that people forget to do, because I love to perform. So sometimes I'm up on the drum riser, sometimes I'm over there, I'm all over the place. If there's a runway, I'm out there. So you can't rely on like, oh, I got the sound perfect at this bubble right where my pedal board is, and then, you know, the gig happens and you're over there. So not being that obsessed with it is number one. You obviously should hear yourself. For me, it's like, once I have kick, snare, hats, and a really clear vocal, and if there's two guitar players and I'm stage right, making sure that the stage left, I can hear the other guitar player, because I have one behind me. But I think that stage volume thing, again, is another aspect of that ego moment coming in that you need to look at. A lot of it comes like, if you're just constantly trying to turn up, I get some people just are kind of deaf at this stage. I get it. If you have the option on a tour to do in-ears, I don't like them, but I appreciate them, because you can't beat a live sound. I always wear ear protection, so I wear the filtered ones that take out, like, you know, all dangerous frequencies, and I have just a bunch of different earplugs. Never ever go on stage without earplugs. Like, tip absolutely should be spread by all musicians, because you will fuck up your hearing in a really short space of time, and you don't want to do that. So, and then if you're like constantly trying to battle, it's just get your band around in a circle and be like, right, why are we all trying to compete and turn up? Yes, you all have to be able to hear each other, but if you're constantly all turning up, there's a bigger issue. And giving your trust into talk to the monitor person, talk to the front of house guy or girl, and say, hey, you know, we're having a tough time with the sound. There's something bouncing back, whatever. So again, just communication with the band, and this whole like sneaking over and turning up. Because if I see someone do that on stage when I'm with them, I go over and turn them down.
They turn up.
And it's just a bit of banter, like, for the most part. But it's always guitar players.
Yeah, it usually is. Just to give some of the viewers an idea of the stages. So, I mean,
That was class.
talk me through, like, first of all, the feeling of playing on this stage this big, and I mean, what does it feel like to step out there, onto these ginormous stages, with these massive rock stars? Like, what does that feel like when you walk out there and you hit the bass and, like, because it's the lowest instrument frequency wise, so you feel it, like you literally feel it.
I love it. I mean, my favorite part of being a musician is performing. Like, live performance is by far what gives me the most joy. And walking out on those types of stages, I mean, any stage, but those types of stages, it's just really powerful because I just love performing. And as a bass player, and obviously I'm just like, bass is the greatest bass player. But that, the intro or whatever it is, there's just something so awesome in that moment. And, obviously looking out into a sea of people that big. But the most beautiful part about that is, for once in life, it's almost like everything pauses and you're looking out. Everybody that's in the audience, no matter what their other differences are in life, political, religions, whatever it is, everybody's there for the same reason. So it's the most unique energy. Everybody agrees on one thing in that moment for that 2 hours or whatever it is, that they're here to see this band and they're here to have fun. So there's something really unifying and beautiful in just that. I think that's, over the years, what I've come to understand why I love performing so much, because also I spent my whole life, as an activist and a speaker in that kind of realm. And it's that one environment where it's like, wow. And it can be anywhere like that. I think that was like France and Bulgaria that you pulled up with that's France. Yeah, that's what is that? Grass Pop Metal Meeting. That's actually the biggest crowd I've ever played to. That's 120,000 people in France. That's Bulgaria. Yeah, I remember that one because I nearly got burnt that night. There was pyrotechnics on stage. Thank you. I like ran into the flame by accident. That was really funny. Like, oh shit, dreads of fire. But I think that's what it is. I love stage, and in fact, I'm really uncomfortable in the crowd watching bands. Not that I don't like watching live music, but I feel more comfortable on stage than I do in crowds. Because I just want to be on the stage. Essentially.
Yeah, you want to be up there.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And I guess I'd love to get your kind of philosophy on this, but I mean, like, your clientele list, I mean, is absolutely insane. Like, I mean, you're literally working with the guys that invented rock music. Like, I mean, Steven Adler and Dee. I mean, how do you first of all kind of get those gigs, or how do you build a relationship to get their trust for them to, like, okay, Tanya, we're going to give you this gig, like, we're trusting you. How did you nurture that relationship, and how did you build it from the start? Was it like a reference and then you had to go in an interview, or how did that work?
Everything is from building relationships. And I mean, people call it networking, which I think kind of makes it a little clinical. To me, networking is just getting out there and getting involved with the groups of people that you want to interact with, and like putting the pieces of the puzzle together. So when I first moved to LA, it was a total leap of faith. I had kind of played all of the gigs in Ireland that I could get in the sort of session realm, if you want to say. I'd done a bunch of different stuff there. And then I said, you know what? At that point, I had done the studio session with Maynard, and I figured, look, if I have someone like that on my CV, I'll go to LA. What's this LA thing about? And the way that I got the Dee gig, so when I first came out, I was playing with all R&B and hip hop, loads of different cool local bands. Like, it was so funny. I was like this pasty white Irish chick in the hood in Inglewood playing with all these awesome gospel players. It was just the best time. They're like, come on in, Irish chick. And from that, I start doing like jam nights, which is absolutely essential. And, every country and city and town's going to vary to what's exposed to them, but doing those like open jam nights, not even playing them, but just going and being around the people who are doing what you want to do, that's essential. You absolutely have to put yourself around people who are already doing what it is you want to achieve, because that's again applies to everything in life. So I started doing all those jam nights. I started playing with a lot of really well-known session players who played in all these big bands that were out on the road. And I ended up getting asked, someone saw me play a jam night, and I think I don't know if it was with Nuno or someone, and I was doing a random jam night, and this guy approached me after and mentioned Dee, and then I had known Mark Schulman, who's the drummer for Pink and Foreigner, and I had played with him, and I had played with one of the guitarists, and they put my name in for a one-off with Dee, that he was just doing something. So it always comes through recommendations for the most part. I'd say like 99% of the time, it's like your peers are promoting you. It's not, you're not found by some magical agent. It doesn't work like that anymore. There was like a guy back in the day here in LA that did that, apparently, when I first moved out. But all of it was this weird domino effect of just being consistently putting myself in the circles, playing with these musicians, being so prepared that people were like, all right, she's serious. And then, playing, going to NAMM, networking. I don't really like calling it networking because it feels artificial. Just hanging around and saying hello to people that you respect and asking them questions, not going in. Because I think people have a tendency to, I think it's out of nerves. People have a tendency to go in with a kind of egoic approach on things. Well, whether it's about, how many pedals they have or how great their solo was. I honestly think most of the time people are just doing that out of nerves. Just go in and be modest and be humble and ask questions. And hey, I would literally walk up to people and be like, hey, I just moved to LA from Mullingar and I need a gig.
that's, I mean, like, because I was going to ask you, maybe you might want to, maybe like you'd like to elaborate on it, but yeah, like, I mean, is that your approach? I mean, because like when you're working, I mean, some of these guys you're working with, like, they've insane, like, I suppose, celebrity status. So, like, do you ever get that kind of starstruck, kind of like, oh Jesus, that's Stephen Adler Construction, or if not, like, how do you, like, what, like, did it take you to kind of mature to kind of be cool with that, or did you ever get kind of starstruck or
no? So I think that's something, I mean, I just naturally never did, because the people that I get starstruck by are like authors and scientists and stuff. I'm a total nerd. So rock stars don't even faze me, if I'm being honest. They just don't. And I think that's not to say I don't admire their work. Obviously I do, but there's nothing to be gained from you're actually making the star uncomfortable by being starstruck. And that's not to say you can't walk up to someone and be like, I really like your work or whatever, but there's a way of doing it that just normalizes the both of you. You're both just humans at the end of the day, right? So it's funny because when I got the Dee gig, I knew who Twisted Sister were. I didn't listen to them growing up. Maybe my dad had a record, I can't remember. I mean, I knew of the song We're Not Going to Take It because it's like an anthem. But I didn't really know much about Dee. And I remember saying it to him on the first day. I was like, yeah, man, I don't really know who you are. And we just had a total laugh about it. And that band was amazing. That particular lineup was so incredible because we had Julian Coriel, who was with Alanis Morissette, still is for many years. He's coming from that, who's Larry Coriel's son, the jazz genius. And Mark Schulman from Pink. And it was just like the most ridiculous band. And we had so much fun, and everybody was, a real serious, like on time, super prepared musician, respected each other and all that. But I think the starstruck thing, it's not going to do anything for you. So try and keep it in the bag. Yeah, totally. Again, that's not obviously to say, that you don't admire their work. The one and only time that I say I got a little bit starstruck would have been Maynard, but not that I showed that to him, but that was more bizarre because I was so young and it was so surreal. And like that, I was like recording in his house. So it was like shit. And I was a huge Tool fan. But you should always let it come out in admiration, not like shock. And at the end of the day, they just want to get on with their job as well. Absolutely. And they want to perform well. They want their band to know their shit. They don't need a band behind them being like, oh my God, I'm playing for.
Yeah. Totally. Did he make you play Schism on the?
Yeah, it's like prove it. No, so that session was really interesting. So that was for Pussifer, which is obviously his side. I don't call it a side project. The serious band, amazing band. And the live band are all friends of mine as well. They're incredible. But at the time, he was, they were still touring Tool and APC pretty heavy. So Pussifer was, I don't say it was on the back burner, but wasn't touring at the time. And he wanted to do this record. And his whole thing with that project is like a rotating door of guests. So it's guest records. So he has so many different players. And he took a risk on me. He's like, all right, we met in Wales, a whole other long story. But when he invited me out, I did not know how to prepare for that. because you're like, what the hell do you practice going to write with Maynard? And I was just like trying to learn all sorts of different stuff. I didn't even have good gear. And when I look back, I wish I had the basses that I have now. Like I had a piece of shit bass that I brought out there. I didn't know anything. But the point is, we all just got together in a shed and wrote from scratch. And that was terrifying, but brilliant. So I think that nice kind of bubble of emotions helped.
Yeah, really, absolutely. So like you mentioned there, kind of like just being prepared kind of a few times. So I suppose on the professionalism side, like what do you do, or what do you think is important to keep consistency? Because obviously, like you I imagine like you're touring with these guys, but at the end of the day, you have to have a level of professionalism, I imagine. How do you make sure that you keep that consistent, like from artist to artist, from client to client you work with? Like, do you kind of draw a line on where you kind of, what you do and what you do and don't do, or how do you maintain that professionalism across a variety of different clients, going from rock to rap and and everything in between? Like, how do you maintain that professionalism? What advice would you have? Like,
well, I think it should just be something that goes without saying. Like, professionalism to me is obviously being prepared, like we talked about, being on time. And that comes down to the little things, like being early at the airport. And, if you have a bunch of stuff to check, well, then go early, and don't be the one that's like calling the tour manager frantically, like, oh no, I didn't give myself enough time to get to the airport. So all the little obvious things. Making sure your gear is in check. For me, I'm just not rock and roll at all. I don't really party on the road. It's not my thing. That's not to say I don't go out every now and then and have a drink with the lads or whatever, but not when I'm touring. Like that's not who I am anyway. It's exhausting, the travel and all that side of it. Keeping fit, eating well, because that also shows your boss, whoever it is in whatever level of band, that you're serious. It's like you wouldn't go to work drunk in any other job, or you wouldn't leave. Well, maybe you would leave. I don't know. I'm not judging either, but for me, that's the thing. It's like I'm always going to be on time. I'm always going to be at sound check, even though you might have to do it at 8 o'clock in the morning or 6 o'clock in the morning, whatever it is. It's just showing up and respecting the work that has been put in front of you. And the being on time thing, I can't stress enough. And also just being helpful. Like, don't be a pain in the ass. Like, everybody has a hard job, especially the crew. Like, I'm always stressing the crew are so important in this industry. Yeah, I think it's just a little like that is a given across no matter what the tour is. And there has been some artists like, that have like a quirky thing that you've worked with where, you don't talk to them for 90 minutes before the show. Fine, that's cool. I'll stay over here. Or, whatever it is, like with Adler, absolutely not going to drink around Steve. And we're very open about all of this because, he's had his own struggles in the past. I don't anyway. So that was easy, but you're not going to suddenly be like, oh, hey, you have a bunch of fans, let's bring them back and have a party. No, you have to respect where that person is at. You're working with them and for them, and they're a friend. At the end of the day, these people are now my friends. So it's respecting them and, just being a professional yourself and not getting in the way. You're there to do a job like any job.
Absolutely. Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's just respecting your client, I suppose, and keeping it like professional. It's so key in every area, just even music. I mean, it's really important. So I'm just going to change gears because I know that music's only one string to your bow, and I know you do your Highway to Health show as well. So for anyone maybe that hasn't seen the show before, could you give us kind of a breakdown of what it's about and kind of what's in the show?
Yeah, so excited about this. So it's not out yet. We've just finished filming season 1 just before the lockdown happened. I mean, we were so lucky with the timing of filming. So it's myself and Derrick Green from Sepultura, who's a good friend of mine, and also a lifelong vegan, animal rights advocate, environmental, just like all the good feels, human rights, everything. So we, have the very, very similar moral compasses, and we've been friends for years. And we were talking about trying to do a project, 2 or 3 years ago. We started talking about this because he had an idea for a show, and when he showed me his kind of pitch deck and then I showed him mine, and we were like, these are basically the same thing. Why don't we join forces? Awesome. Yeah. And like, how much more fun would that be? And actually this all happened in Dublin, by the way. With Sepultura. Yeah, I was on a layover and Derrick was with Sepultura playing the Tivoli, I think. And this kind of came out. He was doing an interview for another friend of mine who has a great health documentary. And the production company are Irish, Kerboot Productions. They're two of my best friends from Dublin, which is just even better. The whole team is so amazing. So the whole show is basically, I mean, it's kind of hard. It puts itself in a box. If you say it's like a travel food show, it sounds so small, but really what it's become is so much bigger. So we've been to Brazil, we've been to Mexico, we did LA, we did Nam, like 2 separate episodes. We actually had William Duval from Alice in Chains on that one. We had so many amazing guests. And then we went to our hometown. So we went to Mullingar and we went to Cleveland, where Derrick's from. So we've done a bunch of different episodes. And within the episodes, yes, it is about like plant-based lifestyle, as in like staying healthy and trying to eat mostly plant-based. Both of us are doing this our whole lives. So we're in no way like preaching or pushing. I don't, people can be a bit wary if they hear the V word. So, but each episode is like, we talk to Ford Motors in Brazil about the automotive industry turning electric. We talk, it's about sustainability. It's about the longevity of the planet. It's about everything. It's going to be about civil rights. It's going to be about just human rights. It's so broad. And I feel like this is like the only way I can describe it. It's kind of a plant-based Bourdain, which is ironic. I was a huge fan of his work, absolutely huge fan, because the whole like undertone of that type of show is, which we're going for also. Yes, it's about this, that, and the other with food and tips and how to stay healthy. And yes, there's loads of celebrities because that's what gets eyes on things. But really, it's opening people's minds and breaking down stereotypes and meeting people from all walks of life and meeting people where they're at as well. So we're not out there interviewing only vegetarians or vegans or people who are not at all. Quite the opposite is what we want. Yes, there will be that, but with that, yeah, I'm really, really excited about this project because it's a merge of my passions. So, Derrick and I have been touring for so many years that we know that world. We know eating on the road. We know meeting people from all different walks of life. We know what the world is like because we've been in it a lot. And then we have a lot of contacts ourselves who our friends already are. So we're able to pull some great people on board. So we are now editing season 1 and in the process of trying to get it on the right platform. So hopefully this fall we'll be able to, sort of announce where it'll be. So it's very exciting.
Very exciting. Yeah, I can't wait. Wait.
It's really, really upbeat, fun, just normalizing the celebrities that are on it and just making really complicated topics easier to talk about, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. And anyone wants to check out any of this, I have the links down here. So I was on the website and I was having a look at your sizzle reel and some amazing guests on there, rock stars, some Moby there, unreal. Like, yes, it's and like how hands-on are you with the show, like as in production and organizing, or how hands-on are you in general with the whole show in every way?
Hands and feet on, all limbs on. This is absolutely like the past, especially the past year. I mean, so our team is very small, amazing team. It's really, the core of it is 4 of us plus a couple of editors that help us. So myself and Derrick are very heavily involved, and myself, I've done everything from fundraising to tour managing the travel of it, and myself and Derrick both get like the guests for it. We're completely indulged and involved in it. It's not, someone didn't approach us to do a show. We grew this ourselves from an idea and a seed, and we've made it happen by pulling together all of our resources and everybody putting equal energy and help into it. So it absolutely is all of us, all hands on deck, and that's 4 or 5 of us total, basically. Yeah, which is lovely though, because it's not like someone came and went, "Hey, you guys would make great hosts." It has naturally, let's do this show that I wrote. It's all us, and we're constantly like throwing ideas back and forth. Like this week is a really, we've been talking a lot about wanting to do an episode specifically focusing on racial inequality, and that goes down into the food system. So that's the great thing about it's a very malleable show. It can be about lots of different topics, shining a positive light. So yeah, we're completely all hands on. There's no one pulling strings, only us.
Yeah, and like, I mean, hats off to you, because like I work in production as well, and it's a lot of work. It really is a lot of work. And I suppose some people might not realize actually how much time you actually might be putting into this, like day, night, and so it's important to support people like yourself who are going out, entrepreneur really, basically. I mean, that's what you're doing. You're starting your own your own series and you're building it from the ground up. And I mean, hats off to you. I mean, I'm really looking forward to seeing it. did you find, moving from music production into video production, how did you find that switch? Because like they're two very different things, really. I mean, there's similarities for sure, but I imagine that transition was hard enough, easy.
Well, no. So I mean, lucky for me, like our main producers, John and Lucy, who are a Dublin production company, Corboot Production, they are people that I've worked with them for so many years that when I completely trust their vision, they know how my mind works. They know Derrick well enough now as well. So we have this lovely organic, it wasn't like a stranger production company that came to us. So we've all, we've worked together so much that there was no fear in like the vision to start with, which was great. But as far as like the project managing, which I've sort of done since the start, I haven't found it. I think that the music industry gave me the skills to be able to do it. So I was used to tour managing because I tour managed all my own bands back in the day, and I was always involved in booking the gigs and booking the flights. So it was just a different version of that. I think myself and Derrick always laugh. One of the hardest parts is booking celebrities.
Yeah.
Pain in the ass. Trying to work around. We literally have been in a position where we've already flown to a country and then they've tried to reschedule and we're like, oh my God.
I say managing them and just getting their calendars clear, I imagine is
all the moving parts. But I think being in the music industry so long has stood to us a lot in that sense, because we have so much experience with that, with things being cancelled, problems with bookings, flights, blah blah blah. The little things to do. To maybe put the insurance on the flight just in case something changes. So it's a lot of work for sure. I mean, I couldn't even begin to clock the hours we put into this show and all of us, but I think it's the great thing about life is you're always learning. A skill set that I might have picked up in my early 20s now helps me doing this. So you start to oh yeah, I learned how to do that when I was touring around the UK in my van with my band.
Exactly. And I mean, look, I'm sure like I've experienced, I mean, if you're passionate about something, like, which obviously you were very passionate about this, you'll learn how to do something. If you really want to do it, you'll do it. If you want to learn to be a host on a your own show that you're going to build from the ground up remotely, like, you do that, you just, if you love it. Yeah.
You figure it out. Your passion should always drive you. What excites you should always drive you. And the maddest thing, we were only laughing about this because we had a business meeting the other day with an agent, and by the time we went to film the first episode, we had been so busy, like getting the show together, fundraising and booking flights and buying gear and, making sure we'd visas and, all this mad stuff, waiver forms, all the little things. And then the cameras turn on. And then suddenly, for the first time, me and Derrick are hosting a show. And we're like, oh shit, yeah. We didn't even have time to think about like the question. So we're now looking as we edit, like we're always joking saying, oh my God, I can't wait to edit onto the further seasons, because we were just learning in the first one. But again, that's not, we're not going to dump it because we don't feel like we were good enough hosts. We learned, oh, don't ever say that on camera again, or don't do that. And now we apply it going forward. So I think that's it's the beauty of life. You're always learning, right?
Yeah, I mean, and it's a whole other skill set that, like, you now have. I mean, it's I mean, hats off to you. It's super. I know, like, the show is about food, and like you're very into like your vegan and plant-based recipes and stuff. I follow you on Instagram and I see all the amazing things you cook. How important do you think it is, or the question would be, do you think it's difficult to stay healthy on the road? Because obviously, I'd imagine being on a tour bus, is difficult to kind of eat healthy. Do you think that it is really hard to keep healthy on the road, or have you kind of found a way to kind of make that work?
I don't, because I believe it's your choice. You're going to choose. Yes, it's harder in some places. Ironically, for me, the hardest part of the world to get healthy food in is the US. Not like the coastal states per se. It's like the middle of America is harder because, unfortunately, it's just bombarded with fast food nation. But I've never found it hard. Now, I always have to remind myself that I've been pretty much doing this my whole life. So yes, it's easier for me because it's not like it's not an option for me. This is how I eat. It's how I've always eaten. So it's about the little things. Like, if you know that you're going to be on a tour bus for however long, any half decent tour bus has a fridge and some storage. You bring healthy food. You're going to slip. It's not about being perfect. And then eating sides is key. So no matter where you are, even if it's like just some shithole restaurant in the middle of nowhere that has only heart attack food, they're all going to have sides. So that's my like get out of jail card there with food. It's like, oh, okay, they have, you know, a baked potato, they have broccoli, they have whatever, asparagus, green beans. I just order all of the sides and make it a meal. And I never go anywhere without some healthy snacks. So I always have like nuts and seeds and, you know, the very typical vegan things, some fruit, or if I have time, if I don't have a really, really early flight or airport call and I'm home, I'll make something cooked and bring it in a tub. It might seem like extra effort, but for me, it's the only reason that I still thrive on the road. I watched so many friends, and especially older crew, get so sick touring, like so sick. They've been doing this for 10, 20, 30 years, and all they eat is fast food at every stop. And they all have diabetes, heart disease, you know, all of this, you know, blood pressure problems, whatever it is. It's just so ingrained in the culture here, especially. It's quite sad. So I think you have a choice. I mean, you have a choice. You get one body, you get one life, right? We can debate till the cows come home what's the best diet. I don't even call veganism a diet, by the way. It's like that's the lifestyle. Eating plants is what I eat. But and I'm by no means like miss clean eating. I still eat pizza and tacos and whatnot, but I know the balance. It's like I can be bold for a day or two and have ice cream or whatever, obviously dairy free. But for me on the road and what I do, I'm still feeling good and be able to jump around on stage and been doing it, you know, 10 plus years now. I feel great. You know, I never ever get sick. I only get tired, and that's just because I may have to get up, you know, at 3 o'clock every morning to go to the airport or whatever the obnoxious airport call is. I just couldn't do it any other way, and I wouldn't want to. And it's so I think if you know, if you already have like a lot of bad habits with eating, just take it in baby steps. It's not a competition. Nobody should be judging you. It's like just switch out one meal, just start doing a healthier meal, order more sides, reduce the animal product intake, just play around with it and, you know, find your middle ground. Because at the end of the day, you know, eating always crap on the road, as I'm sure you know, and I did it back in the day in Ireland. You'd stop at, you know, you'd stop at the petrol station and get whatever wedge sandwich, chips, buddy, or whatever it was.
I've seen. Yeah. Actually, I was in the shop earlier, and I swear to God, a guy actually got that. Like,
I kind of want one now.
This chicken fillet roll with the wedges in it. I was like, wow, that's pretty amazing.
It's a typical like middle of, you know, Ireland touring. You know, it only takes 4 or 5 hours to get around the whole country, but that's fine when you're younger because you get away with it. But you don't over time. And also, like, why would you just keep, like, we now know, we live in an age of information. We now know that this food is not going to sustain you. So why do it? And now especially there's and even in Ireland, every time I'm home, I'm so pleasantly surprised, even at petrol stations, there's like a vegan sausage roll. Now that's not to say that's a health food, but it's a change of times, you know, and just Jesus, just eat more veggies. Like your parents were right all along.
Yeah, they won.
They were right. Now I'm trying to get them to eat more vegetables, which is hilarious.
Yeah. Oh yeah, I'm trying myself to get better as well. How are you fixed for time? There's a few more questions I was going to ask you, but if you have to jump, I can jump into the Q&A section.
I'm grand, man. I'm good for another little bit. So
cool. All right. So I just wanted to get your kind of feedback. I mean, you know, I've had most of my guests on this show have you know, they have a similar lifestyle to yourself, as in they're in the industry and touring. Do you think there is enough support like coming off the road? Because I imagine it's difficult. I mean, I found it very hard, for example, like when I used to come home from gigs, when I was in kind of the corporate scene, you know, maybe I finished a gig, a wedding or whatever, I'd be home at 3 a.m. and I found it very hard to turn off my brain and sleep. And then that affected my next day. And like, you know, I wasn't really enjoying it like as such, because it was, my lifestyle wasn't the way I wanted to be. Do you think there's enough support for musicians that out there to get, you know, help, that, you know, mental health support or whatever, that maybe do struggle with coming off the road? And like, you know, because it is a total change of lifestyle.
Mm-hmm. No, it's a great question. And immediately, no, there's not enough mental health care anywhere in the world. And it's a huge, huge issue. And it's, you know, we could dive into this for hours. But the immediate answer is no, there's not enough support. Obviously, there should be more. But as far as like, and I know that feeling so well, you know, it still happens. Like you get off a gig, whatever it is. Like I'd same when I was in wedding bands back home, or playing in Dublin and go back to Mullingar and suddenly being like, oh, it's that come down, because you're in a state of total adrenaline when you're performing, and the hype to the gig and the lead up to it and the press release or whatever it is. You're in that state and it's very exciting. And then it's over, or the end of the tour, and you're not sure, or a tour gets cancelled. So I guess I don't want to call it my advice, because it could sound a little condescending. With what I would say to other artists, and what I found really worked for myself, is not placing all of my happiness in touring or music or the artists I'm playing with. That is one aspect of what I do, and I thoroughly enjoy it. But I went through all of that, and I had some serious come downs. And it's really, really tough. And then especially earlier on in my career, where you get a bigger gig and you were starting to like climb the ladder, and you're like, oh my God, this is it. Like you put this sort of latch into, oh my God, this is it. I got the gig. You have to remember, in the arts, in any job really, like it can end at any point, but especially in the arts, like all tours are going to end. Some even prematurely. Like I've been in situations where artists have just been like, I don't want to tour anymore, and they can, because they're they it's not going to affect them monetarily or whatnot, and then the band is just out of work. You're like, oh. So I think the aspect I took from that over the years is definitely not placing all my happiness or like relying fully on gigging. Now luckily for me, I've always had other passions. It's something I'm grateful for. So it's not like I'm going looking for other jobs to just survive. I've always been building different aspects of my career. Like I got into speaking, and obviously I'm a passionate activist, so that's something that I put a lot of time and energy into almost every day of my life. Like that is my main passion. Music is something else I do that I'm very passionate about, but for me that's really helped. And I can only sympathize with someone who's struggling, that doesn't or hasn't found it, because I don't know, everybody has another thing. I think it's about finding that. And I just did a talk to a bunch of students, and it was in affiliation with the prevention of teen suicide, because this is a very serious thing that's happening, where the schools are closed, music schools are closed, everybody's out at gigs, and then you have this feeling of emptiness. Like I was pulled off the road. I was in the middle of a tour and I had to come home. But I already had like the show going and other things, and I was able to just instantly redirect my energy. Now, no, not everybody has that, but I think it's important to use this time to find your other things, like find what it is. And that could be anything. That could, it doesn't have to be like a whole new career path. Music will come back. The events will come back, but you should never leave your happiness and your mental like stability in one aspect of your life, because you can't rely on anybody or anything to make you happy. And this all sounds as heady as some people like to say, but really using this time to be okay on your own, in your own head. And that's obviously easier for some people, but talking as well. I wish there was more resources, and being open and reaching out to people. My sister's now involved in a great campaign, which everyone in Ireland that's watching should check out. It's called Evntz App, EVNTZ. And she was just about to launch it, because she works in the event. She's an event controller. She's also in the music industry. And all the gigs were cancelled all of a sudden. So that the app was originally for the ticketing, crowd control, where you could get your bus and your accommodation all in one place for all the concerts. But now they've flipped it, and she's turned it into an artist support. So they're selling merch through that to help exactly what we're talking about, to help crew especially, and artists. But now, she's working with Brezzy and a couple of the lads back home to branch it out into mental health awareness for crew, because they're, artists, at least we can sit at home and play, or maybe record and set, but crew are having a really hard time, because the industry being pulled for crew is like, the people who build our shows have no work at all. So I think that I wish that there was more. I know Brez does great work in this, the mindfulness and, the happy pair. It's not music, but they're worth following, because they're just such positive influences in Ireland. And I love that. And just not being afraid to talk. I know this sounds, so simple and like, yeah, it's easier to say when you're out there or whatever, but I feel completely alone out here at times. I still have moments like that. I'm really, really far from Mullingar. I'm really far from Mullingar.
Yeah.
And I miss my family. And I miss my friends back home, and I miss the banter like this. But I have surrounded myself with phenomenal people. And this is not the rock stars. I'm talking about my friends. And this is the kind of foundation, I think, that's really important. Like, really look at who you are surrounded by. And if there's anything toxic, get rid of it.
Yeah,
like,
absolutely.
That's it. And it's so important. And it's, I don't want to water down mental health issues because it's so huge and it absolutely needs to be talked about, but kind of looking at the little facets of it bit by bit, like who you're surrounded by, not being afraid to talk. And if you're too shy to talk to someone, get an anonymous person. There are people out there and resources out there, and this too shall pass, as scary and weird as it is, but there's also an opportunity for growth here and finding other passions and establishing other possible, revenue streams.
Absolutely. I think I've taken through things from what you've just said, and I definitely agree, on both of them. But just what you're saying, kind of from my own experience as well, just like the keeping people around you thing, or sorry, who you spend your time around with is just. I really don't think people realize how much it affects you. I remember, like, a few years ago, I used to watch this fitness guy called Greg Plint, who's actually since passed away, but and he did this video, like just this motivation video. Like, he does them all the time. He's the most cover model capped guy ever on magazines, but he made a video on this, and he just was like, cut this shit from your life, like, cut. And like, I remember watching that video, and I honestly went into work the next day in a job that I didn't like, and I walked out the door, like, I handed in my CV.
Nice. That's awesome. That's bravo to you.
Music full time,
Yeah, it's brilliant, and that's scary for people to do, but it is remembering that the initial cut, like whether it's someone that's really not a good friend, like especially your friends, or a job you're miserable in, it's going to be scary in the initial moment to quit or to say to that person, hey, I don't think we should be around each other anymore. But in the long term, it's absolutely better. If you're always listen to your gut, like that's what's got me where I am. I'm never, ever veer off what my gut tells me. And that, you can take that as sounding, again, a little hippie or airy, but your gut instinct, which has been like impossible for people to like scientifically diagnose over the years. Everybody knows what I'm talking about, though. You just know, like your intuition is so strong. And I think that sitting alone for a while and really looking at that and looking at whatever it is, your job or your friends, but yeah, it's so important. Yeah. And that same can apply to the industry. Like, I've been in gigs that are really well paid with bigger names, but I'm miserable because there's toxicity within the management or whatever, and I can only go a certain length with it, and then I'm like, I'm out. I can't fucking do this. Like, this is just toxic. It's only a gig. And I'm not willing to be miserable. So yeah, I think that's like seriously important. And sometimes that's family, and that can be hard. Like, I'm very lucky to have amazing family, and I've spent years really refining that art of who you really surround. Like, I have a million acquaintances, but I have a very close circle of amazing friends.
Yeah, and it's really good to recognize who they are as well, and because there's sometimes you kind of maybe take people for granted, like, and it's really important to recognize that key, that key circle of friends that like you trust, especially for when it comes to, like, if you're going through a difficult time or whatever, to be able to bounce it off the right people. Because if you bounce an idea, even a musical idea, off the wrong person,
oh my God, yeah, it
could really affect you and end up you go down a path that you really didn't want to go down at all because you weren't around the right people. It's just. Mm-hmm. It's one of those things. I mean, going on from there, like, I kind of feel like you've touched on it, but do you think that's the key to being successful, like, as in your career, kind of, and just life, but to be flexible and to be be this kind of rounded in every way, where you can kind of just be, I don't know, I'm kind of getting lost, but like, you know what I mean, like
no, I get it, yeah. No, totally. And I think for starters, like, separating success from fame for starters, or, just like what you're trying to achieve. Like, for me, I had all that at the very start coming out to LA. You're just fixated on this idea of getting the gig, the big gig, whatever that is. And that's going to bring me success. For me, I've never wanted to be famous. Like, fame for me only means a platform to shout about what I'm passionate about. Yeah. So I don't want to be, I'm really, although I'm introverted extrovert. so I can be extroverted, but I don't want to be like famous like that. No way. That's why I love being a bass player. You're in the background. It's like you can be on the stage, but you're like, I don't want to be a front person. I want to be a bass player. But yeah, I think definitely separating the two. So for me, being successful has got to do with my sanity and my happiness, for starters. And that's just something you learn over the years. There's no kind of quick fix answer for it. And I also don't put like success in the same category as like the monetary side of it. That's, to me, I'm building an empire of multiple aspects of my career that's taking years to build. And I want to get into a position that I know and I have a goal with, but I'm not putting all these like super dead targets on myself that, I need to make this much and I need to get with this person. And so I think just separating them, but everything is sanity. Like at the end of the day, you can have all the money and all the big gigs in the world and be completely miserable. So it's really important to look at what makes you happy and who makes you happy. And music doesn't, sometimes I feel like artists I've met over the years, they put so much pressure on being a full-time musician. Like, I'm not even a full-time musician. I am annoying. You know what I mean? I do so many different things, but putting that amount of pressure on yourself, like it's okay to do music as well as other things. Like it doesn't mark your success just because.
That's a really good advice. Actually, that's a really great looking at it, because definitely I know even myself, like that's just such a good way of looking at it, that you can have more strings to your bow. Like, yes, you do music, but I mean you could branch into other areas. That's a really good piece of advice.
I think that it's essential, especially if it takes some of the creative stress off. Like I know loads of artists who maybe it's two things in the arts, or maybe it's like a quote unquote normal job half the week, and then they do music half the time, but they're really happy because they know that time is for pure creativity, and maybe it'll expand into full time. But also like everyone's life is very different. I don't have a mortgage or kids to worry about in my life, so I just have to worry about me. It's very different. So you can't just apply my lifestyle and go, here, do this, this, and this, and then you've got it. That doesn't work. It's not how the world works. You might have 2 young kids to feed, or you might have a mortgage, or you might have a business that's in debt. But that doesn't mean you can't be an artist. And if you're an artist, it doesn't mean you can't have a normal job. And there's no shame in that. It's ridiculous to even think that. And I don't think that being a successful musician has to mean that you only do music. Maybe it does. But even within music, I have friends that do multiple things. When they're not touring, they're, writing music for TV, or they're teaching, or whatever it is. Like you have to be really, really savvy to many things. Like making a living off music is really fucking hard. And I am always completely transparent about this industry. Like, yes, I've played with X, Y, and Z big names, all shiny, but you're only hired for those tours. We're not the ones living in the mansions. That's the artists.
Yeah, and that transparency is great for especially for the time period we're in now, where like there is no gigs, as you said, like so it's definitely a great insight. I just want to pull in a quick thing from Kim here, and just on what we spoke about earlier on. So just a little bit more information on what you were speaking about. That's set up here in Dublin. So if anyone wants to check it out, there you go. I'll add the links as well at the bottom after this.
Oh, thanks, man. Yeah, it's really cool because a lot of the Irish bands are getting involved, and I've been posting a bit about it because I can't be involved because I'm not over there. But it's really, really cool. So everyone should check out that app because it directly helps Irish artists and Irish crew. So it's on the App Store and all that good stuff. Evntz with a Z.
Right, I'm going to jump into some Q&A because I probably could keep you here all night chatting to you.
Thanks, go for it. Hit me.
Cool. I'm going to put in some here. So Graham asks, what's the crack, Tanya? What's your favourite GNR tune to jam out with Stephen? And that, like, does he bang out all the GNR stuff, or what is it pretty much strictly GNR?
I know, everybody, that's what people want to hear. He's so famous for that. So yeah, we do his own record a little bit, but mostly GNR. What's crack, Graham? I love that. Nobody says that over here anymore. So like I miss that in interviews. And my favorite GNR tune to jam out with Stephen is probably Rocket Queen and Welcome to the Jungle. Just because it's so fun for me. I start the song with Stephen and we have this whole thing, and it's bass and drums, and I love Welcome to the Jungle because, you know, there's a whole bass breakdown in it.
Yeah. Oh yeah, there is actually. Yeah. Cool. Let me pull another one here. So, hey Tanya, this is a pretty broad question, but would I think you have any advice for an upcoming Irish artist today, mainly in relation to getting your music out there and making a name? So yeah, difficult question to answer, but
yeah, I mean, it is a common question, but a hard one to sort of short and long of, because it's just so weird, because all of a sudden we're in a pandemic, right? And it's like, woo. So everything has changed. But I think that you can harness the power of that. Like, you can all, you know, that they say adapt or die, right? So it's also an interesting time for music, if you're a writer especially, and really starting to maybe try and get your music placed more than, because we can't gig. Like, we can't gig at the moment, and we may not be able to gig really until next year and well into it. So I think really finding other ways to get your music out there could be through publishing and placing and pushing and finding those people. Like, I don't know who does it in Ireland anymore. I'm so out of the loop in the industry, but there's definitely really cool agencies and managers and that specifically work in taking music and trying to get it placed on TV, adverts, all that. So I think that would be something, because I remember there's a lot of bands that you end up discovering because, you know, oh, that song was on the ad. I think that's a really powerful tool that people don't utilize enough. And just being consistent. Like, I have a love-hate relationship with social media. It's kind of a necessary evil. Yeah, people can't control their anger on there, and it's really irritating. But it's also a really powerful tool. So I think being consistent with it is something that I got off it completely for a year or two. I was so over it. And then I went back like last year or something. I was like, all right, I'll focus on one. I go to Instagram. But I think just being consistent and putting it out there. But there is no easy answer. But I would say trying to look into getting your music placed more and just being consistent and building your own audience, so that when we are back in the realm of being allowed to perform, that people know about you.
Yeah, exactly. Good answer. Question for Tanya: roughly how much of the year do you spend actually on the road with touring, and do you juggle personal relationships, family with being, or how do you juggle personal relationships and family with being away?
It depends. So the last few years have been nuts, because as well as gigging, and the way that my last few tours worked, just by fluke, I was with an artist called Jordan Fisher for about a year and a half, pop artist. And I immediately jumped in, like at the end of Jordan's tour, which was a couple months in the US. I was flying back and forth and had started with Dee. So I was on the road. That was 2 years ago, for about 9 or 10 months of the year. So that was intense. And then last year and the year after that was about 7 months of the year, maybe, with Dee, but some broken, you know, you not necessarily out the entire time. You have, like, you'd be home for a week or whatever. But the thing about my lifestyle is as well that in between that, I often don't come home. So if we have a layover on the East Coast, I'll stay in New York because I have things going on there with, like, the guitar company, and I have friends there. So as opposed to flying back. So I'm a total nomad, and it's not the lifestyle for everybody. I'll stay on the road. I'll stay out. And then obviously with the show with Derrick, what we were doing is when Sepultura had a break in tour for like 2 or 3 weeks, and I did, we flew down to Brazil and we filmed there. So I can spend anything from 4 months a year to 10. And yeah, that is my life. So that's how I balance it. That's just, you know, my family know how I mean, I live in LA, my family are in Ireland. So I see a lot of my friends are also artists at tour. So I see them out on the road, and yeah, it's a bit mad. It's not for everybody, but
yeah, no, it's definitely not for everybody. And like, I mean, hats off to you. Like, I mean, it sounds like you've got so many strings to your bow that, like, you know, you're kept busy all the time, and, you know, it's interesting stuff. It's not, as I said, it's not just the music, and you have so many different things going on. So, I mean, to anyone watching, you know, I meant to say that at the start actually as well, but like, I remember seeing you play. The first time I've seen you play was with the Laundry Shop back with
yeah, it was so fun.
Yeah, I mean, like I that was literally, honestly, one of my favorite Irish albums ever, because I love that music, and that's kind of the style of music my band plays as well.
Nice.
But yeah, like, I mean, I think, you know, like, a lot of people look up to you, like, in a way, because there's not really that many musicians that come out of Ireland, that make it over there in the US. So I just got to wrap it up by saying fair play to you, and you're flying the flag for us anyway. So
thanks a million. Thanks for having me with our TH lack of.
Absolutely. So before we go, hang on there, Tanya, before we go. But any of the links that we've discussed today, I'll add them into the description below. I have a few links down there already, the website for Tanya and a few other pieces on the video production she's done. So listen, Tanya, with that, thanks a million for jumping on. If you want to hang on, I'll end the broadcast, but if you want to stay on there for a second just after it goes. But listen, cool. Really appreciate you coming on. The best of luck with everything, and I'm really looking forward to seeing the series now when they get released. I'll be all over it.
Thanks for having me, man.
No bother. All right. Thanks, everybody.
Slán.